Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox, on this wonderful Tuesday morning. And once again, we spend the day seeking the truth. Now, yesterday evening, I did a quick flash video on a bit of news about the rising of alcohol prices, the minimum unit price, that is to say. That's over and above any increases that will be going on to onto things with sort of normal inflationary forces. So it's actually going to massively increase the cost of alcohol in Scotland, which is already, of course, higher than anywhere else in Scotland. And as this isn't a tax, merely a punishment beating, it means that the supermarkets themselves will increase their profits with no benefit at all to the people of Scotland. The drinkers, the problem drinkers, will continue to drink, only they're spending even more on it, which means their families will have even less, increasing poverty. And the people who aren't problem drinkers are just being punished because the SNP lack the ability to target the problem drinker. And so everybody loses. What a marvellous testament to the SNP and their decision-making process. But it is quite a hefty hike in price. So we'll have a look at it and see why they are bothering. Here goes. Now, this is one of those stories which actually has a massive impact, but is not made as headline news. It's sort of down there in the lower, smaller articles whenever you go looking for things like this. But it is one, like I say, that makes this massive impact on the lives of people. And that is that hard-pressed Scots face huge booze price increase as the SNP to confirm a hike in minimum unit pricing. Are you being ruled by Puritans? Are you being ruled by people who think alcohol is evil? And I think one can only assume under Humza Yousaf that is possibly the case. But then I suppose if he can get rid of all the pubs and clubs and off licences in Scotland, it'll be a much nicer place for all the new Scots who aren't used to such things. Alcohol is set to skyrocket in price in Scotland as the Scottish Government looks set to confirm plans to increase the unit price of alcohol from 50 to 65 pence. That's a 30% increase in that charge. And that's despite no definitive evidence it has lowered booze-related deaths in the country. In fact, evidence outside of that actually suggests it's making the problem worse. And because this massive increase in booze prices, people looking to escape can't afford the escapism that a bottle of wine or a six-pack of beer brings. And what they are looking for is going to the corner boys and getting more illicit forms of, shall we say, amusement. Hard-pressed Scots are set to face further tax, they're calling it a tax, but it's not a tax, on the booze they buy, as the SNP is set to confirm plans to hike up the minimum unit price of alcohol to 65 pence. But it's not a tax, because that increase is just the sales price, the minimum sales price. It doesn't affect what the supermarkets are paying. It just increases their profit. None of this money, none of this excess money goes to the government. Insofar as the increased profits that the supermarkets will have on their booze sales will be taxed at corporation tax levels, but that all goes, of course, to Westminster. A ministerial statement is set to go ahead on Thursday, with the government announcing these details. It means the cost of beer, whiskey, wine and spirits will increase even further, growing the divide with England and potentially leading to cross-border booze cruises to stock up fridges and cupboards, which of course is perfectly legal, and there is precisely the square root of bugger all that the Scottish Government can do. So you're going to have big white vans nipping down south of the border, running into Carlisle, running into Berwick and things like that, and filling up and coming heaving back up, just rattling, jing, as they're filled with the bottles, filled with the cans, all the way back up to wherever you are, and then being sold cut price, to people in the local area. And who does that benefit? No one. I mean, sure, you're getting your booze cheaper, but the shops and around the off-license and things aren't going to get their sales. They could end up going out of business because so many people will be going south of the border. Meanwhile, now's the time, if you're thinking of opening a business, to go to the border, and open up an off license, Jim's discount booze. It's the sort of thing you get, it's like Calais, isn't it? You get the old booze crews they used to pull in the coaches in, and then we go straight in there and go, right, I'll have a crate of that, 5 cans of that, and then put it back in, and then go home. That's it. You weren't there. You weren't there to visit France. You weren't there to take in the historical sites. You were there for the cheap booze. Well, the same thing's going to happen, and it's perfectly legal and totally uncontrollable. Anyway, the rising cost is going ahead despite almost record levels of alcohol-related deaths in 2022, with the 50p being in place, 50p rate being in place for 6 years. So they brought this 50p excess charge in to Scotland 6 years ago, and they said, well, we're putting this up. This will reduce the number of alcohol-related deaths. And has it? No, and indeed, I believe last year was a record number. On top of which, of course, the illicit substance use has gone through the absolute roof because people can't afford one. But the other stuff is as cheap as chips. Anyway, plans will see the lowest price for a full pack of beers rise from $4.70 to $5.72, while a bottle of wine was sold from $4.88 to £6.34. If you're buying a bottle of wine at $4.88, let me tell you, it's not very good wine. And a bottle of spirits, 40% spirits like vodka or whiskey, would now cost a minimum of £18.20. That's a ridiculous price. It's about £11. I can go to the Lidl up the top of the road. Or we haven't got one in the village, but so the next village along has got a Lidl. And you can buy a bottle in there for like £12. It's ridiculous, isn't it? A report from Public Health Scotland in June 2022 found no clear evidence of minimum pricing causing problem drinkers to change their ways. And so since it's not changing the ways of the problem drinker and they're still drinking as much, it's now costing them more, which means more money out of that family's household budget is being spent on this, which means less money is being spent on things like food. Who is being punished? There are problem drinkers. The SNP are not willing to tackle them. Meanwhile, families are being impoverished by this because the family has a problem drinker. And so their claim of lifting children out of poverty is once again blown away by this rising price that benefits no one, does not achieve what they think it will achieve. And they're dealing with a product that is perfectly legal and that there is no control. There's no cross-border control because there's no border, effectively. There's no customs border. They don't stop you on the M74 rather as you're crossing up and say, anything to declare, sir, and then charge you a tax on your alcohol, because that doesn't happen. It's mindless, pointless, and in actual fact, damaging. It's a damaging policy that is now going to be made even worse. But do you expect anything else from the SNP? Minimum unit pricing was set at 50p when it was introduced in 2018, and the legislation will expire on April 30th this year. And in the 4 years since it was introduced, alcohol-related deaths have risen year on year to reach 1,276 in 2022, the highest number since 2008. So introducing this has made things worse. A sunset clause in the 2012 legislation meant that changes need to be brought forward by the end of April, and then it must be voted through again. And a consultation was launched last year and asked for views on continue it with a price increase of 65p. It didn't work at 50, it won't work at 65, it won't work at all. And yet they keep insisting that this is a policy that is succeeding. Well, it's succeeding if your aim is to increase misery and poverty. So yes, in that case, it's an absolute roaring success. In a second double whammy for Scots who enjoy a tipple, SNP ministers are also considering a public health levy on stores that sell alcohol and booze, and with this being an extra tax they will need to pay on these sales. Retail leaders warned that this cost will be passed on to the consumer. But they won't put it on alcohol. We did this yesterday. They're not going to put that tax, that shopping tax on alcohol. because that just eats into alcohol profits. They'll put a penny on everything else and blame the government. And who'd blame them? That's what I'd do. Anyway, there you go. Another example of a stupid policy pushed through because of stupid ministers not understanding that they've failed. I'm coming up. How much longer do the people of Scotland have to put up with a stupid regime that brings in failing policy after failing policy that they claim will do one thing, but actually makes things worse continually? It isn't just one policy occasionally that turns out to be, not as intended. It's every policy fails and fails spectacularly. And it is the people who are suffering. And worst of all, of course, it's the vulnerable, it's the poor, it's children that suffer the most. Because the SNP cannot accept reality. It's time for change. And even SNP voters must see that by adding more expense to alcohol will not stop a problem drinker from drinking, but it will make his children hungry. Thanks very much for watching. Do please hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.